What's going on? We're back here with the Vigor Life Podcast. The Bald Syndicate is in the building. And as you know, like this is when the most wisdom gets dropped, is when the bald is in the building. And for the third time on the podcast, my man, my brother, Dr. John Rusin. What's going on, man?
Man, it's been a great weekend here again.
It has been.
Seattle, Washington, Vigor Ground, PPSC.
And we break records here. If we don't break records, we don't even want to put on a damn event, damn it. So we just had a great weekend. 110 coaches for pain-free performance specialist certification. Phenomenal. I've talked about it before. Now it is a certification, so I highly recommend that you take it. It'll make you a better coach. It'll help your clients get better results, and it'll position you better too. But more about that probably at the end sometime. But what kind of to piggyback on. We've talked about a lot of stuff in the last two episodes. Today, what I wanted to dig into is program design. And like, I know this is like we could talk about that for probably about 14 days straight. but part of actually is like, as part of this pain-free performance model, because I mean, I've been around you and like know your training. I've done your training tons of times. I still jump back on the programs quite often. And that, your philosophy around, because we talked a lot about the warm-ups.
Yeah.
And also like breaking down the movement patterns and, what's the best exercise and fit for the person in front of you. But dive a little bit into like your philosophy around training. And like, I'll just probably cut in here and we'll probably go all over the place, which I love. But, because a big part of obviously, improving performance and staying pain-free is besides exercise selection is also like, hey, rotating intensities and volumes and things of that nature. But just helping, everybody that's listening kind of, I would say, see that 10,000 bird's eye view of your thoughts around that. Like,
well, it was interesting. 2 years ago, I was in your homeland, Slovenia, and they were putting it through translation for the course. And the first introduction that they had to the course was, this is Dr. John Russin's course, Pain-Free Performance Specialist. This is the non-dogmatic approach to health, fitness, and training. And I was like, damn, I'm going to use that going forward because that's essentially what I believe in terms of programming. I think about it as a P4. That's kind of our programming blueprint model. You prepare, you prime, you perform, and then you pump that shit at the end. So it's an all-inclusive type training session, whether you're going bro splits, body splits, upper lowers, or if you're going full body training. The biggest mistake that people make is they go in for one dogmatic approach. I want to get strong, so everything needs to be 1 to 5 reps. Face pulls, the same as deadlifts. Instead of having a more inclusive base approach on regional tissues, on movement patterns, but overall health and wellness, because you can only do one thing all the time so far until you get broken down, you get a little bit burned out, or something forced a meathead deload, which is time away from training via injury. So if you can kind of rotate in all of these different types of training modalities, it's an inclusive program. You might get a little bit stronger, a little bit bigger, time by time by time. It's all going to happen as an approach up for longevity. Because when you only have goals for 6 weeks or you only have goals for 6 months, things become very short term. You put ego in front of intelligence instead of having a long-term mindset of us and my coaches and my athletes and my clients. They want to do this shit for life. So we're going to get them there. So when they're 70 or 80, they're still weight training. They're still having fun doing what they love to do.
So basically, I mean, one of the things that, and I think we talked about this before, was, really that approach of, hey, yeah, you could probably get stronger, like shorter term, but it's like if you train this way long term, you're really gonna bang up. Actually, not even long term, like medium term, you're gonna get banged up, right? And so like when you talk about that, it's like the prime, perform, and pump is having like those mixed, I would say, rep ranges within even a training session, which I've always loved to do that. Even just from I've loved to do it more so from. If nobody gave me the science of it and I didn't study it, it was just like, man, this shit makes me feel better. And I want to leave with a pump. And number one is like, I don't want to, because if you're doing like 3s and 5s and like that's your whole thing and like you're at week 4, man, like your joints are like screaming at you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But long term, like, so for instance, how much do you, and I'll just give you some scenarios and examples, right? So if you got, you prime and you get your main lift, whatever that is, you guys were today doing, you're doing deadlifts off the rack, but with the reverse bands, right?
Yep, exactly.
And that was probably your main lift.
Yep.
And then, and you prime, you go and prime that lift. So you're feeling great before you start. You ramp up, you hit your let's say your 3 RM for the day. Now, quick question. Do you ever, like on, even on your big lifts, rotate the reps higher? Or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or for instance, I'll give you an example. I'll just give you an example from myself. As soon as I started doing belt squats, which are the squats that I can load heavy as shit and not worry about my back at all.
Yeah.
And I would rotate the reps even from 6 RM, but then even as high as a 15 RM and try to like push those PRs on it, right?
Well, the true max effort method, I think it is misconstrued in the industry. People think that it's just going and lifting as heavy as you possibly can, moving weight from point A to point B. There is some truth to that, but pure max effort needs to be a single repetition. The criteria there are a straining rep, meaning that it was a hard rep through that concentric lift, and you kept pristine and perfect form while you strained.
The key.
The key is perfection of technique and form with a strain. So mechanically, neurologically, muscularly, that is going to be a very high yield. And people see my training all the time, especially the last 2.5 years or so, is we are using the max effort method with general fitness. We're using them with our youth athletes. We're using it all the way up into more of a longevity-based programming scheme. Because I think that when you bring the quantity of the volume down, especially on big barbell lifts, and you bring the quality up and the intensity up, you can really sprinkle in 1 or 2 hard reps and then build in the rest of the training session in your 5 to 10 for strength. Build it into your 10 to 25 for hypertrophy. Work metabolic stress with 50 or 100 sets with body weight. Do something as a finisher, and you are going to be healthier because of it. It goes against what everyone thinks that they know. Heavy lifting will break you. Heavy lifting will leave you burned out. But if you only sprinkle in a couple reps of truly 100% effort work, the rest of the programming will accrue the volume in a more pain-free, joint-friendly way. So you get in, you get out very quickly on those big lifts that you go heavy as fuck on. But then you build in something before, something after, and something that makes you feel good before you leave the gym. But it goes against people's religion. It's like, I'm a functional trainer. Therefore, I can never use 1 RM. I can't even use 2 or 3s. 5s are going to be safer for our people. I've actually seen that a 1 done pristinely well is going to be safer for the average person, because when we get up to 5s, 6s, 8s, I see programming with barbell back squat, barbell deadlift, and barbell bench press for sets of 10 to 15. First thing to break is going to be the core or your posterior chain tension that can control the ball and socket-based joints, your glutes, your core, your upper back. So if that is breaking, if your stability breaks first, compensation hits. So it turns into a set of 15 that looks really good on paper. Well, you do 8 good reps, and then the rest are bullshit.
Yep.
And that extended rep scheme is where I tend to see people have the most struggles staying healthy long term. It's the kind of thing that doesn't bite you in the ass right there and then, but the next day you kind of have that soreness that's in the joints. It's not muscular. It's not delayed onset muscle soreness. It's the kind of thing that racked you up a little bit, but we try to stay away from that.
See, like, to me, it's like this breaking the ego more than anything else. Because here, I really think that we have, and I said it when we were talking last night after the event, like this whole standard of lifting. I still think that and I remember me back in the day, right? And I thought I had really high standards, right? But still, like, you go in and when you get amped up, all of a sudden you're losing form. You're like, man, fuck it, I got this up. I'm feeling good. Put another 20 on that, on a deadlift, right? Yeah. But it wasn't, like you said, pristine, right? Pristine form. And I think that that's one of the keys where, yes, like heavy lifting can be very safe, but you have to be able to drop the ego and say, hey, that was pristine. Exactly. I can get another 40 pounds on this, but it won't be pristine. And because of that, I shouldn't, right?
Well, this is an interesting thing too, because, if you do a barbell squat, bench, and deadlift, anyone who's been lifting for long enough, they know, I know my theoretical gym PR. You know what you once did, even if it was 20 years ago. But when you start using novel setups, so using the example what we did for max effort deadlifts today, we used 2.5-inch block under the plates to raise up the bar a little bit, make it more accessible with spine neutral position. We used reverse bands. We used a 55-pound bar. All of a sudden, we're training with a group of 3. We don't know what we're capable of doing. It opens up your mind to, okay, it doesn't matter what the external weight on the bar is today. We are going to achieve the 2 things that we're after with max effort work. Straining with perfect form. And before you break perfect form, you're done and on to your next thing. But I went in not knowing if I could lift 365 or 565. And it opens up you to be more honest with your performance and actually draw back a little bit. Because when we compete against ourselves, we're not going to be the same Monday as we are Tuesday, let alone 3 months or 6 months away. Progressive overload is only so important. We need to be training more neurologically. We need to be training more for the given day as opposed to your theoretical wants. This is a big reason that I stay away from percentage-based systems.
Yeah,
Percentage-based systems.
I was literally going to throw that in there because
Yeah.
I was just reading studies that, and this I don't know how long it was over a course of time it was done, but it was pretty. I would say it was pretty relevant studies that said on a given day, the max can be 25% up or down
Yeah.
from the tested. And we're talking about a 50% range. And if you play with that, let's take a 300-pound deadlift, right? That means you might be 375 or 390, or you might be 230.
Yeah.
No, sorry, or 210. I mean, that's like a massive, massive, massive difference, right? Like, I probably threw the numbers off there, 25%. So 75 to 25, 375 to 25. But I mean, that's massive, right? Yeah. Like, and how do you, because now what happens is people come in, they're tired, and they're looking at their numbers, and they're like, dude, like, their warm-up sets feel heavy as shit. And you go like, how do I, and then they go for it, right? Or they go close to it, and that's when you're going to get banged up.
Yeah. It's trying to be a self-fulfilling prophecy of what you think you're capable of doing that day because you've done it before, even though you have no business doing it. You're not going to feel great every single day, but you have to get some quality work in. You got to get better somehow. And usually if you're not feeling up to it, there's times and places where you can call it early. But with the max effort method, it is really almost like putting a restrictor plate on your car, because if you have the two key goals, straining with perfect form, you'll get your 100% that day, even though it might be relatively different than 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago.
Do you have a so like I do this as a kind of a little bit of a rule, and I wanted to see if you have any type of strategy. So let's say I got 4 sets of 4 in a program, for instance, right? And I'm coming in, I don't know, I'm feeling a little down. I'm gonna work up to my top set of 4 that day with perfect, mechanical tension, perfect form, pristine form. And then anything over 90% of that would count. So let's say I worked up to 400 for 4 reps, but as I was working up, I did 315 for 4, 365, 385, 405. Anything over 365 would count as my set of 4. I think I learned that from Eric back in the day, but I really, really like that. We use that with everybody, with our athletes, with our gym pop. And it's like, it could vary so much, but we still have a little bit of a rule, right, in place for it.
There's nothing worse than having something like a 5x5. A 5x5 at the same exact weight, because you get in, you do your first set, and you're like, I conquered that shit. And then you're like, man, I have to conquer it 4 more times. It's like going through Rome and kicking ass and taking names 5 times in a row. Why would you do that? You go on to the next city. So I always like a progressive ramp. So when you get to something, it should be a hard rep. I look at velocity and the speed of the rep. Did you strain it or did you not? As soon as you start straining a tiny bit, that is work sets or working volume. Everything else is ramping volume. I look at pain-free training volume because it doesn't really matter. It shouldn't count towards your absolute volume in a training block or a training week. But I like mentally to go, yep, I hit 405. I want to go to 415. I want to go to 425 and really start pressing the load up, because we want to get to a point where we do maybe 1 kick-ass set to failure. To failure is still very, very important, but failure with perfect form is more important. So if you're at 405, you're at 415, 425, maybe you have 440 in you that day. You hit 435. It's super hard. You strain the last 2 reps. The goal is achieved and you move back on. But it's always a risk to benefit ratio. It's like when you put multiple working sets at close to 100% of effort, that's a tough thing to do. Usually somebody is capable of doing that 1 to 2 times a workout. So we usually stick it for 1 single tough ass rep, more of max effort. And then in that secondary auxiliary lift, that strength lift, that's anywhere from 5 to 10 repetitions, we want to get 1 set that you're like, man, I got 100% of the work done that I needed to get there. And then everything becomes pump work after that, because load is no longer the thing. But where people run into problems is that they go, okay, I got 4 lifts today, and I'm going to train them all from the 1 to 5 RM rep range. And by the first lift, you're shot. And then you try to do some bullshit work and you start force feeding. Most likely your brace is gone, and you continue to accrue more and more volume in the power of strength schemes, Whereas you should just kind of call it a day and get some pump into the tissues, feel better, work on hypertrophy, work on extended ranges of motion, and do something different. You can't have the same mental focus on 4 things as you do on 1 thing. It's almost like co-managing your training program. I always laugh when you got squat, bench, and dead on the same day. There's a lot of programs like that. Good luck squatting and then benching and deadlifting with anything that is high quality. It's usually not going to happen. So we talk about having 1 key performance indicator lift a day. So that might look like for us today. We did Val slides. We had Valerie at the PPSC this weekend, so we threw some Val slides in there. So we primed up the hamstrings and the glutes. We went in for the deadlift variation. That was the key KPI, the key performance indicator. Over a long period of time, I want to get stronger on the hip hinge pattern, usually from a concentric emphasize bottoms up position. So that's my main focus that day. I am performing. I am a performance athlete for that lift. But then we did walking lunges like a bodybuilder. And then I did a set of 50 with back extensions just to get a pump into the lower back, get some blood flow back in there before I sat on this podcast. So it had all these different rep ranges. It had all different training volumes. They had different goals for every blueprint, every block in that blueprint. And I think that is a more well-orchestrated type of training program or training day that gives you a little bit of everything, because you can focus neurologically on a lot of different adaptations and stimuli, all separate from one another. So it's almost like you can do 4 things better because they're all different things. They're not competing against one another.
Do you, a couple of things, like I just really want to constantly make the emphasis of what you're talking about, which is because I'm sure you see this a lot. I see a ton, right? That there's too much work being done at super high, what I mean, intensity, CNS intensity, for too many sets, rather than just doing really quality work for less, but really getting after it. And then after that, kind of backing off and obviously switching emphasis. Now, the other question too is, do you like going like supplement exercises, right? And hitting PRs on those too. And then, like, for instance, same thing with metabolic work. Like, do you look at that? I mean, because obviously it's different intensity and systemic load. Do you look at that too and go like, hey, let's try to push that as well?
I mean, we definitely push it, but we don't monitor it in the same way as we do our power and our strength numbers. I'm a big believer in the stronger that you are, the more resilient you'll be. The better you move, the more resistant you will be to pain and injury. So for my style of programming, strength's always going to be our number 1, but we are co-managing in a multidisciplinary model where we have different types of techniques, different focuses come in, but it's not going to be a KPI for us. Obviously, we don't want to get weaker on our strength lifts or our auxiliary lifts, but the way that we program is a little bit differently because we program off the foundational movement pattern: squat, hinge, lunge, push, pull, carry. So we're going to have KPIs for each of those 6 movement patterns, but from there, it doesn't really matter like what you dumbbell bench press for sets of 10 to 12. It's just for a different goal there. It's not moving from A to B with external load. It's having a mind-muscle movement connection with that. So the emphasis becomes a little bit different, but we're co-managing all these different types of models of training together. And we've really even worked in energy systems to the point where it becomes a regenerative tool for us, as opposed to trying to set a PR on the Airdyne bike. If you can have one singular focus for your training, that's really good. But then you have to have an interplay for the rest of the stuff that you're doing. Maybe it's not the exact same focus, but everything else goes into maintenance mode and little by little getting better. So for us, our energy systems work, our aerobic, our anaerobic, our threshold work is done, but it is not going to be a long-term KPI for us because strength is always going to be that. But these things all interplay together. That's the big secret. You can't go all in on one thing because you're going to be giving up so much else in terms of physical characteristics.
I mean, basically what you're doing is like looking at, hey, here's this main thing that's a mover. How do these others support that main mover, right? Versus, I mean, because I think that's one of the things too, is that sometimes for people that, I would say even for people that like to train, people that are getting into training to get a result, I think the coaches really guide what's going to happen. But people that like to train, it's like, well, oh man, like I'm going to go heavy and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to fucking kill myself on conditioning. Man, I got a great workout in, right? Like, but did you versus like, hey, what's the main thing you want to achieve here? Let's support it with all the other stuff, right? Because I mean, energy systems are very important, but even in a sense of like, because you use them like, hey, how can I recover so I can train harder, recover faster? I mean, shit, that's what steroids do, right? Like, they help you do that. Like, well, how do we do that in a program so we can recover faster and train more
I love that line, train harder to recover faster. That was one of our taglines for functional power training. And about 4.5 years ago, we had functional hypertrophy training out. Great program. It's the first program. You've done it with your team. First program I ever wrote for like large scale. But then we made some really good changes in 3 years of beta testing for functional power training. And we truly did train all of the different physical characteristics separate from one another, but living in a symbiotic environment. And I'm biased here. I think it's some of my best programming work for large scale, single cell program, but we are truly training in the power schemes. We're going through strength schemes. We're training for 2-mile runs, 1-mile runs, PRs on the Aerodyne bike. We're doing all these different things, and we actually put more muscle on people with functional power training than we did functional hypertrophy training, just with these different stimuli, putting in max effort and then speed and dynamic effort work, lateralizing, rotating based energy systems work with circuit bases is pretty dynamic. And that's the style of training that I still use today, selfishly, because that's how I feel the best coming off of planes. That's how I feel the best. I mean, I taught for 2 straight days at the seminar. I was able to max effort lift this morning because it becomes neurologically regenerative. The mechanical systems don't get absolutely crushed where you're just standing around for 5-6 days after training with such delayed onset muscle soreness that you can barely take a shit in the morning. And it is something that you can train extremely hard in the real time from 60 to 70 minutes a day. And then you can feel great on the next day. But usually secondary in the week, you're not doing big, heavy barbell lifts anymore. You're doing things with speed in mind, accommodating resistance. You're training at maybe 40 or 50% of a 1 RM projection, and then you're doing that fast. So in terms of training this while minimizing the risk everywhere else, it's powerful because you are truly training the multimodalic model. And a lot of people try to talk about themselves doing that. Oh yeah, I train all the physical disciplines. It's one of the single hardest things to do as a coach or a programmer, to mix and match things like energy systems, power, strength, hypertrophy, and movement quality together. Everyone's trying to do it, and that's where we tend to see the most injuries and burnout, trying to co-manage all of these things without mindfulness.
Yep, because you got to understand it. And like, once again, going back to like, you have to know how one fits and supports the other, which is why I'm such a big fan of, I mean, look, this is why you study this stuff, right? Because it's become like very, very, oh yeah, well, I just do some cardio on the side. Well, what type of cardio? what cardio do you need and what supports this program, right? Like, because if you're doing anaerobic conditioning, 4 days a week with your strength training programs, and it's just constant, like super high intensity circuits, like, no, that's not going to be a smart idea. Yeah. And then what are the exercises you're using there, right? So, and I like when you talk about like, the power training basically program, like I think that there's another part of it too, is that, people enjoying it and having this kind of like switch up. Yeah. And I'll say it's really not novelty, but it feels like it, because it's like, man, okay, I went heavy. Okay, but
let's talk about novelty though. So novelty is one of the most important things for actually having buy-in and having that, fuck yeah, I'm going to go in and train today. Functional power training was the first program that I put together that is different every single day for 12 weeks.
So here's kicker, right? Okay, this is what I'm going to ask you too. I'm glad you brought this up, because the frequency of changing up the exercise.
Yes.
And I know that like you changed it up a lot there. Yeah. And because I'm a big fan of this too, but explain like how often. So for instance, right, for example, because the movement pattern stays the same, but exercise changes. So, and I was listening to Jay and Matt Wenning talk about this, and like this is something I've done for a long time, and because first of all, it's like, hey, do the same fucking lift for 4 weeks. God damn.
Yeah, it's the worst.
But talk a little about the philosophy and idea behind like rotating that really fast.
So for beginners, 3 to 6 weeks is what they're capable of in terms of trying to have a progressive overload and a KPI lift. So that's cool. If you want a barbell back squat for 3 to 6 weeks, you can do it there. But as soon as you become an intermediate or more so an advanced trainee, you need a little bit more novelty. And I'm not talking about like running a fucking marathon and then going into a powerlifting competition one day later. Yeah. I'm talking about slight variation. Mm-hmm. So with something like a functional power training scheme, every 3 weeks we change up our blueprint, which is the way that we plug and play the different movement patterns with key emphasis on each of the blocks of each training day. So we'll have key lifts that will alternate. So for max effort lower body lifting, we don't squat every week. We squat every other week, and every other from that is a deadlift derivative. We don't bench press every week off of flat angles. We go every other week on an angle, incline or decline, and then into a flat angle or a range of motion deficit. But from there, we look at all these other movement patterns, single leg training, horizontal push and pull, vertical push and pull. We are adding slight variation into the set and rep scheme, so total volume, but also into the exercise of choice. When I talk about slight variation, let's take a lat pull down, for instance. We can go wide grip lat pull down. We can go chin grip lat pull down. We can go neutral. We can go wide or narrow. We can go pronation, neutral, semi-pronated. Everything is the same force vector. It's the same pattern. But in terms of the dynamic stability of the muscles that we're working on in the upper back and the lats, it's all novel positions to keep our shoulders healthy. Yep. So as soon as you can kind of plug and play with a reason why behind you're using these slight variations, your body kind of thinks it's doing the same thing. But in terms of your neurological adaptation, you're able to learn how to restabilize. Muscularly, you're able to hit the muscles from different angles, the regional patterns from different angles, and it really just amplifies almost the novel effect of, wow, this was really hard today. It felt really hard because it's brand new to the system, even though it's kind of the same but different.
But it also prevents the overuse. I mean, like if you've ever, this will be like one of those duh moments, but it's like, when you do lateral raises with dumbbells, right? And like, great exercise, love it. But man, if you've ever done that for 4 weeks and you're like, man, my elbows are killing me. And you could be completely healthy, meaning like you don't have anything that's like really, but you're like, man, why is this bugging me? Because you're not changing stuff up, and it's just such a repetitive pattern.
But this is where it comes from. So old school programming is predicated on a KPI. So you're going to have a KPI, and the way that you get stronger at that KPI lift is that you build in secondary lifts and accessory lifts based on that prime lift. So if you want to get stronger on bench press, what is your weakest link? If it's on lockout, you're going to be doing a ton of tricep work. You're going to be doing a lot of upper range partials. But that's not the way we program. So we take a big movement pattern for the day, our KPI, and then we fill in the blanks with patterns as opposed to accessories driven towards that main lift. So we want to be on a lower body day. We want to be training a squat pattern. We want to be training a bilateral hinge pattern. We want to be training on single leg, and then we want to emphasize direct work on either the glutes or the hamstrings, or both of those things working into hip extension, knee flexion moments. So that is a quality, inclusive lower body session. For an upper body session, you should be doing pushing and pulling in different angles, and you should also be able to have some upper back work that is more isolated and driven to get your ratios up, especially pulling to pushing. So we should be doing all of these different things, so that turns into 4 to 5 different lifts, and you have all of the patterns in mind. You could even throw carries in on lower body or upper body day. You could do sprint work. You could bring your body through space with locomotion. And all of a sudden, you're co-managing these 6 foundational movement patterns, most likely throwing rotation in on your warm-ups, your finishers, and your energy systems days. And that's what a human being needs to maintain in terms of the movement competency, the movement system capacity. That's how we get better. We open up movement quality, and then we maintain it while getting strong in the process.
Now, on that note, like for instance, I mean, obviously there's such a wide array of, if somebody's a beginner or they're intermediate, or maybe they, they had pretty good athletic performance in college. Now they're getting back to it. But that whole thing about threat, meaning like, getting back, like, man, barbell, like I don't want to touch it. Yeah. And just because the thing is, do you, if you're individual programming for somebody and like they've been beat up, this, that, the other, like, I'm just such a, especially nowadays, like the proponent of, having like, I would say the right exercises and the right ramp ups for people they're like, hey, I do want to lift heavy, but in their mind, they're like, I can't, especially like barbell stuff, right? Sure. How much would you change up things like I said, whether it's Zerchers, front squat, double kettlebell squats, and still using, like, for instance, using a double KB squat for like a 6 rep, right? Like, tell me a little bit about that, because I've, started, I'm looking at the patterns and I'm like, hey, look, I'm going to fit you into this. Like, we're going to do the pattern, but like they'll do double KB squats and go like, man, these feel great. Yeah. Like, okay, we're going to go heavy as fuck on this. You know what I mean?
So since I've been here, I'm now an online fitness trainer. I'm an online coach now. So we started online coaching programs over the summer for the first time. I've been in the industry for a while now, and I've never done online coaching before. So we took in new clients over the summer. We've been managing them all year. It's been very cool. But when we bring in a new client, I honestly don't care who you are. we're going to build the base up of that foundational movement pattern pyramid, and we're going to make sure that people can do things extremely well. Usually that turns into anywhere from 4 to 12 weeks of an on-ramp period where we're going back, we're taking away the barbell, and we're actually getting people in to really get pristine quality movements with more functional patterns. So we're getting into goblet squatting versus barbell squatting. We're using the trap bar versus the barbell on deadlifting. We're using dumbbells and neutral grip bars and all of these things with push-up derivatives instead of going into straight barbell bench press. And people are honestly, that is the spark that they need to have success from 3 months to 6 months to 12 months to multiple years under my program and under my coaching, because it sets them up for feeling great in a 4 to 12 week period. And then when they feel great, you sprinkle in the stuff that they really want to do, the hard things, and you just give them a little bit by little bit, like by little bit. And the key is that you keep them healthier, you keep them in better shape. And then when you actually reintroduce some of the stuff that was most likely the thing that broke them down, the thing that led them to me, you're far more successful, because the stronger that you can make your movement pattern, the stronger and the wider you can build the base of that pyramid, the more successful you're going to be when you get to the top of that pyramid, because you have stability in play, you have movement mastery in play, and you were forced to do the hard things extremely well. You know, there's nothing fun about goblet squatting 120 for 25 reps.
Oh,
I heard you just did it.
Oh boy. Yeah,
There's nothing fun
that.
about Bulgarian split squats for 6 to 8 RMs, loaded heavy as fuck. But the better that we can get at some of the stuff that has been neglected, the better it's going to be when we actually get into sexier programming. But even for the strongest people, we start them at the bottom and they quickly earn their right to progress back up. But that's a mistake that most coaches make. We were joking around at the PPSC. How many of you guys have advanced clients?
Yeah.
I'm an advanced client. I need the best coach in the gym, and we need to be training under the most scientific theory possible. They can't do a push-up, they can't do a dumbbell row, and you feel like throwing up into the trash can when you see their deadlift form. That's not an advanced client. And even for people that have been training a long time, they've been training like shit a long time.
Absolutely.
So their actual quality training age is at 0. So that's the time where you have to go into the rebuilding mode.
Well, I got to stop you there. Quality training age. We talk about training age, right? But that's a really, really profound thing to say, because here's the thing. Like, an example would be like, hey, man, listen, been training for 8 years. And it's like, all right, cool. So I'm not going to judge anything. All right, let's take you through an assessment. Let's do some lifts and ramp up and see where you're at. And you're like, oh, geez. Because if you have been training, you know, it's like the law of the slight edge, right? Like, you kind of let your deadlifting, you got a little bit of round back. You're really not ramping anything up. You're not doing any activation, no priming. But then for 8 years, that's what you've been doing. It's actually worse than a beginner, because man, we have to unravel this and get you back to even.
I call it reverse engineering.
Absolutely.
That's a lot what we have to do.
Right. So it's like, it's really, imagine that if, every coach should be like, which is, you got to find it out, because people will say what they'll say, right? But like, you have to assess all the time. But, quality training age. Because the thing is, like, 10 years of non-quality training age puts you behind a beginner that's just starting.
Absolutely,
to me, you know what I mean? Like, because now it's like, holy shit, like, we really have to work on, like, you got to take 3 steps back to take,
for sure,
6 steps forward. But the cool thing is that I think this is a big lesson for everybody on the coaching side, and anybody that's listening that's, wants to get the best results in training, pain-free results in training, is, that John said, hey, like, we do 4 to 12 weeks of foundations, depending on where somebody's at, right? Yeah. But then, because you're prepping everything for the long term, like your mindset and your thought process has nothing to do with short term stuff. Like, what, if somebody goes like, I want to build muscle, get strong, like, you're not going to achieve that in 12 weeks. I mean, and keep it. You know what I mean? Like,
you can get results in 12 weeks, but you can change your fucking life in a year.
Correct.
And you can change your life for life.
Yep.
In 2 years.
Oh, you can get. I mean, the thing is, like, if example, right? Somebody like me that's been training for a long time, I could go on your program, like, I got great results. But to keep anything, right? Yes. Like, it's to keep anything, and especially, look, the reality is with a lot of people in the training, the training they've been doing hasn't been great training for them, for what they want to achieve long term. Like, that's gonna take, like, if you want to change your lifestyle, really learn about yourself, get those, quality patterns down. Like, a year later, now you can be like, man, like, I'm feeling good about this.
People give up too quick on shit that works too. We tend to see this all the time in the industry. Is you'll have somebody and you'll be like, man, I just set PRs. I never felt better. I literally have more energy after 12 weeks of this program, but I'm gonna try a hypertrophy instead. And you're like, you are a better human being because of the way that you've been training, the way that you've been living differently. Why the fuck would you give up on this? And I think people give up way too fast on a model of training that works for them because it's the shiny object syndrome.
I was about to
the grass is greener on the other side. But I always recommend for people, if you are still making gains, we call it riding the wave.
Yeah.
You want to ride that wave for 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 years until it no longer works. Because you only got so many bullets in the chamber of your gun in terms of novelty, in terms of the way that you train. Because every truly novel change in your programming scheme or your focus, it's going to have an adaptation period to it.
Yeah.
So you need to maximize that adaptation period. And then only then when you plateau or when you're forced to change, then you change. But just going 12 weeks on this, 12 weeks on this, yoga specialty program, 12 weeks into functional hypertrophy training, you have to have a key singular focus. But a lot of people, they don't have that until they're forced to have that. But don't give up on something that is working because it is extremely hard to get something that works.
And there's also a lot of, you can make so many changes that still apply within that method and structure we're talking about, to where it is novel enough to where you're having fun and it's not like, ugh, it's boring, which is what we were talking about. Yeah. But I mean, I think obviously social media perpetuates this thing where it's, you're looking at it and it's like, oh man, look at that fucking program. Like you see some videos, it's like, I'm going to jump on that. Like, why though? Like, what do you want? Oh,
you can do a little bit of everything too. So like using myself as an example, the last 4 months, I've been taking certifications with Marcus Martinez in kettlebell, Jason C. Brown, Clifton Harsky, and I am not a kettlebell master, but you know what? I'm going to learn how to yield this tool because it's fun. It's a new challenge for me. I didn't change the way that I'm scheming my functional power training. I just figured out a way on how I could adapt this new tool that I want to play with a little bit into my blueprint. So all of a sudden on Tuesdays, on Thursdays, on Sundays, when I'm doing regeneration work, I'm doing a little bit of skill with the kettlebell. When we're priming for the big lifts, we might do some ballistic work where the centripetal force is actually in play better with the kettlebell than any other tool. So there's ways to use novel tools or sexy schemes in your general program, but you need to still have that base, especially if it's still working for you. But I think people are like, oh, I'm only a barbell guy. Oh, I'm only a kettlebell guy. How about you use everything? I always laugh when I come here because you literally have not one of everything. You have 5 of everything. When you talk about trap bars, Luca has 7 different trap bars. It's like, oh, I want a trap bar deadlift today. And then you have to sit there for 15 minutes and figure out which one you want to use. So that stuff, it's all cool because you can plug and play different tools to keep it fresh, to have excitement. I still like to be excited when I go in and train. I like even today, like I didn't feel good in the morning. Like I can't barely even speak right now because I've been yelling all weekend at our attendees. 110 is a big seminar. Tough to manage, but it was awesome. But then I came in and I was like, fuck yeah, we're going to deadlift today because Luca's got that old school Texas deadlift bar that literally looks like it came from like the annals of Slovenian bomb shelter.
And we make sure that it looks like that. Don't wipe it down. It gives you about 17%
But we went in and
strength.
We set up something that we don't have at my gym. And I was like, man, this is fun. This is fun. Even today, if you can make it fun, even after getting your ass kicked for 3 straight days, being on the road, being in hotels, eating shitty food. We had pizza 2 nights ago between the day 1 and day 2 of the seminar. That was interesting. If you can have that be fun, imagine just having every day feel cool like that. When you don't have the motivation, you have the habituation that you can actually go in and have some mindfulness with the training session that makes you feel better, but also makes you better in the long term. Because that's why we're training, right? The days of, I'm going to go kick my ass in the gym and I'm really going to fuck myself up. And then I'm going to self-justify being able to eat like shit and not sleeping and all this stuff because I made it hard in the gym. Those days are over because people are smarter now. They want to go in and feel good on a daily basis. If you're coming to Vigor Ground and coming into the 5 or 6 a.m. session, you want to make your life better that day via training. So training is a tool to make your life better. You need to be doing it intelligently, but if you are left drained after every training session, I can guarantee you that your life in the short term and the long term is not going to be better because of training.
I think that's really, really important, right? I mean, that's actually a question you should probably ask yourself. If every time you train, you get up, the next morning and you're sore and you can barely get out of bed. And look, there's,
not even the next morning though. Like I see it now where people kick their ass for 60-minute sessions with 70 people in a room. The rest of the day they're sleeping at their desk and they're drinking 15 cups of coffee to get through.
Yep.
It can be short term, it can be long term, it can be the next day with joint soreness, it can be a month later with recurring chronic base injuries, or it could be the next hour where you can't function in your daily life because you just feel like shit in the gym and you pushed it too hard. And usually that's under a coach's watch. That's a big no-no.
Well, because I think that part of it is actually because as a coach, there's this pressure, and maybe like I've heard all types of crazy scenarios and stories, right? Where sometimes even clients will be like, crush me, right? But because like you have to educate, number one, you have to educate the client about, first of all, find out what they really want so you can support what they want with your training and explain it. But now I think coaches almost have the pressure of people walking out and go like, man, my trainer killed me, right? Like, and it's like, yeah, check in, my trainer killed me, right? Like,
it's the CrossFit mentality. People want to feel like they're working hard, but the best trainers get somebody that feeling while not breaking them down in the process. There's a big difference between 100 rep sets of snatches with metabolic stress work and metabolic stress work on the Airdyne bike. The goal was achieved with the heart rate on both things.
And it's hard.
One sacrificed your joint health, the other achieved the goal with minimal joint stress. So there's always different ways to getting after that, but people love the feeling of sweat, fatigue, and soreness. But those are three of the poorest indicators of a well-rounded, results-based training program there is today.
Yeah. And it's so I mean, there's still too much of this going on, by the way. Like, and why? Because like this last week, I talked to 3 people that, walked into the gym and had a conversation without judging, but just asking questions, and essentially, I mean, I found out from like 2 of the 3 that, they were doing tons of, 'cause I was talking to them. I said, hey, listen, you cool if I do like a quick test with you? Like, they're like, oh yeah, cool. So I do the overhead flexion test with them, like they do not pass the test, right? Like one, the elbow bends, the other one, like they're just arching neck forward to try to touch the wall. And then from there, I was like, well, tell me a little bit about your training, and basically it was a lot of Metcons. It was just like so much overhead work, like push pressing and snatching and clean and push presses. And
that's actually being debated today in the industry, though. It's like we're a believer that if you can't get your body into the range of motion with body weight only, most likely you don't want to load that. You don't want to add speed to that. And you certainly don't want to add a huge amount of fatigue and stress into that pattern. But a lot of people do it and they think, oh, yeah, exercises can be the same for everyone. It's common sense that they're not.
Man, I mean, look, it is such common sense. Now, look, can I do a bottoms up kettlebell waiters walk with maybe, right? But and that's overhead, and of course landmine presses, so on and so forth. Like you have to be able to plug and play for that specific person. Yeah. Please, I mean, like, listen, seriously, if I put you in a position where your rib cage is down, you're neutral, and get your hand overhead, but then I have to push it into place, and you're like, oh, that's tight, right? Like, and you want to go and load that? That's crazy.
It all comes down to how do we maximize trainability while minimizing risk of injury. I think it's negligent if somebody can't get into a position on their own with their own body to actually put any sort of stress loading speed or metabolic capacity on it. That's just me. But that's 101 of strength training, right? Any pattern, any exercise that you plan on doing. Step 1, try to improve the pattern itself. Step 2, maximize authentic range of motion. Step 3, load through a full range of motion. We're skipping step 1 and 2 when we go into actually loading that full range that you don't have access to.
I think Eric just tweeted, it was like 3 things. What are our main goals? Where it's like, number 1, do no harm, right? Obviously. And then number 2 is like, keep people pain-free within healthy movements, and then 3, optimize performance, right? Yeah. Like, but those 3 don't live in, like, they work together.
Yes.
And if you're not, I mean, honestly, if you're training and you're coming into a training session, you're like, like, I just got to warm up to get this joint pain out, and it's like, once I warm up, I can go. I mean, it's like that. There's probably an issue there, right? Yeah. No. Once I get going, I just got to do 100 reps of overhead, and then I feel better. It's like, man, that's probably that's a problem, right? So we have to think about that as a coach and as a client. Like you really, really have to think about that. I'm actually going to just look at the time to make sure that we got about 10 minutes. All right. I got more questions. There we go. Perfect. But like you really got to, you got to think about that, because especially like, it's the same thing as seeing somebody in the weight room. When I go to big box gym, and it's like they're deadlifting heavy with a rounded back, with a crank back neck, and I'm like, hey, you open us some feedback, and like I'll say, maybe you want to do this a little bit different. And it's like, well, but I don't hurt.
You make sure that guy saw you dunking the basketball at LA Fitness before you go and give that feedback,
it's like,
right?
It's like he's looking at me, all right, I'm dunking, and then because like he might listen to me, but it's like it's that whole like, well, it doesn't hurt, right? Or the sensation that people feel where I just get this stretch here, and it's like, well, what type of stretch is that, right? Because that's going to really, really add up. And right now you might not be feeling it, but man, oh man, are you going to feel that, and you have so many, I'm sure you probably see this a lot. I personally know a lot of people that are in their 30s, they got hip replacements, right? Knee replacements. I got 2 close friends, double hip replacement and a knee replacement, right? And it's just happening so much. And you brought up a stat and something you said that with training, like the people that are sedentary and don't do anything don't have as many injuries as the people that are training.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where we're at right now. So that's a very, very important point, because it means that, like, look, you obviously there's a ton of bad things that happen if you don't exercise and eat right, and your lifestyle, is not on par, because now we have cardiovascular disease and pain and all these other things. But if you don't train, like if you're going and training like crazy, not having quality movement patterns, you're not training smart and recovering the right way, those people are getting injured more. Yeah. And those are the things, like that's how physical therapy is like thriving in certain areas, I guess.
Yeah, it sucks though, because we try to act like, oh, the lowest common denominator. Just have people move. It's good enough that they're out there trying. It's like, good for you, good for you. If you're gonna invest your time in something, fucking do it right.
Do it right. Absolutely.
Do it right.
Absolutely. And I'm like, there's a part to it where I'm like, you know what? Hey, if you didn't do anything and you go do Zumba, hell yes, I love it. If you didn't do anything,
it's a first step, but we have a life of steps that need to continue to be taken. So if it's a first step, cool, get somebody into a physical practice, but people usually stay at whatever they started with until they either burn out mentally, physically, emotionally, or they're led to pain and injuries that lead them away from having something that is habituated in their lifestyle. But we can do better, especially as coaches, as trainers. We have hundreds of thousands of us in America right now. It's one of the most booming professions to be in, and we need it, but we need to do better. We just simply need to do better.
And you know what? Like I like to ramp on this point. I really do. And I think sometimes somebody might be like, "Man, who are you to say this, that, and the other?" But look, and I'm really happy. Obviously, like our, the events are getting bigger that we host. I know that like you're packing events. This was a completely packed event, and I think there was probably about 30, 40 people from Seattle. I think that raised their hands. Yeah. Which, when I started doing events here at Vigor, 9 years ago, 8-9 years ago, there was a couple of people from Seattle. Yeah, and obviously there was a lot less people, but only now in these last years, I get so excited when people are like, hey, look, I just want to introduce myself. Like, where are you from? Seattle. I'm like, yo, that's so dope, man. Come through. Like, and they get excited to see that I'm excited. But I'm like, yeah, I'm excited that like there's more and more coaches really, really, really investing in themselves and really committed to this.
I tell our attendees every single weekend, no matter if we're in China or we're in Seattle, you differentiate yourself as a top 1% of the profession of personal training or strength coaching just by sitting in and continuing your education, putting an investment on your career capital. Just by sitting in Vigor Ground this weekend, 110 coaches identified themselves as serious motherfuckers. Yep. People that wanted to make their clients' lives better, and they were going to get the tool sets in order to do that. They're not complacent people. They're blue-collar, hardworking people that are going to grind up and be that best trainer at their gym. There's a lot of this shit like, oh, personal training's so hard. You cannot be successful at it. You can be successful. Absolutely. You're going to be as successful as you make it out to be, because you can put in time. You can put in experience. You can go and volunteer at Vigor Ground. You can come in and go pain-free performance specialist certification. It's a choice that people make. Earlier on in my career, and I know you did exactly the same thing, I didn't go out and buy cars. I didn't buy houses. Every fucking dime that I made was going into continuing education. Mm-hmm. It was going to trying to get around the best people. And that paid off long term. Short term, it sucked. Short term, it sucks going to Walmart and having to buy your food and living in a shithole. But long term, that sets you up because nobody else is willing to do it. At 3.5 years, 90% of trainers will have burned out of the industry. So if you can make it through 3.5 years into year 4, you are going to be a serious contender to being that top trainer in the gym, making money, having a free market economy, which is the fitness industry, and being successful for a career. This isn't just something that somebody jumps into and out of. That is a black eye in our industry right now. We have a lot of hobbyists. But if you can truly become a professional trainer, at year 4, you're gonna have 10,000 hours of training.
Listen, I'm gonna stop you there because I think this is really important, right? And look, if you get into the industry because anything that you're like, man, maybe I'll like this, and you go and try it. That's cool. I support that. Go into it. But here's the other part of it. Even if you go into it part time and you're testing it out, man, do your absolute best, because that's the only way you'll find out if you really want to do it, right? Because people are like, there's this misconception like, oh man, I'm just going to train on the side and make money. And then it's like, oh shit, this is hard. Right. And then it's like, what? This seminar is 600, 1,000, this cert is 1,000. This is like, oh man. And like you said, when I came here, I was broke, man. Like, and everything went into that. And even to this day, because some people will go like, oh, you're doing this and that. Like, I would get rid of anything and everything if I couldn't continue to invest in myself, my team, education-wise. I mean, legit, and now it's just at higher levels.
There's power in lifelong learning.
I mean, it's a must. Like, I can't.
How many veteran coaches do we have in that gym this weekend? A lot of veteran coaches. A lot of coaches that I've looked up to in my career come into this course. They're 40 years old. They're 50 years old. They are still there continuing the education. I pulled a couple people aside and I was like, wow, thank you for setting a standard for what a fitness professional should be. You are here. You flew in from LA. You've been a trainer for 35 years, and you are here with us right now learning new systems to better your clientele.
It's not. Man, I mean, it's nuts, but it's like, and that's what you want to see, and still excited, right? I was like, this is awesome, right? Like, but I
loved it more than anyone.
Absolutely.
It was amazing.
But that's the thing, though. Like, when you really are, like, I'm to this day so if I learn something new or like, oh man, like I could do that. Tweak it like this, do this. I mean, sometimes it's like a complete, profound new method that I haven't like learned before, right? You're searching for that because you truly are purposeful and passionate about like helping people change their life. So any tool is like is like a video game, right? I get the superpower tool and now I can do some cool shit with it. But we go back to this. Like, there's absolutely no way in this industry or any other industry that you can. Yeah, but we're gonna close it up. I know. Like, we're both like, man, we're on a time scale. But there's no way to be great. There's no way to get in that top 1% if you don't put in the work. And I'm seeing too many people like on a hobby trend where it's like, well, I'm gonna do this for a year or two and like see if I can make multiple 6 figures and it's like, man, then you're not in it for the right reasons. Right. And and I think that like there's so much space and room for greatness in this industry. Like, and I feel like within, in the coming years, we're going to get more of what we deserve as an industry. But it's not going to just be given to anybody ever. Like, you got to put in the work, right? Because it is a booming industry as far as like people to get into it. But we know the turnover is like 90% a year. So in most,
you made a great point though. It's like, we are not in the profession to make $1 million a year. We are in a service-based profession to serve our clientele, to make people's lives better. And I think that the moral and ethical standards of many trainers are there, but it doesn't mean that you can't also make a living. The better trainer you are, the more successful and the more money that you will make. I truly do believe that, and that's the reason that we run this education. It's the reason that I think that your trainers do an amazing job here at Vigor Ground, is because you invest in education, you invest in experience that actually holds water.
So with that, I mean, because I got like 17 more questions, but I mean, listen, you'll be back. You already know we're always going to do this at least once a year. But man, where can people find out more about pain-free performance training? I think most people hopefully do know about John. If you don't, then
so the website, drjohnrusin.com, drjohnrusin.com, and also over on the Pain-Free Performance Specialist Certification, getgetppsc.com, coming to 100 cities worldwide in 2020.
100 cities. Check it out. Seriously, go to the cert. It's phenomenal. Follow John. He puts him and the team put out so much amazing free content too. It's ridiculous. So you can learn so much, honestly, like for nothing. So there's no excuse. With that said, love and appreciate you, man.
Thanks,
Great
brother.
podcast again.
My man.
All right. Peace out, guys. See you in the next episode of Big Life Podcast.